Hey you, it's True with a review of the new Perry, the first new water unit in 3 months. Can she crash down on the burn stun meta like a tidal wave, or will sleep teams continue to suffer for longer? Let's find out by checking out her skill set. But first, quick mention, she's an extremely speedy unit at 635 speed. Very few units will get the turn before her if she is on the battlefield at the start of a battle. And that will usually give her the ability to use the extremely powerful Sleep Torrent. Straight away it costs 3 spirit, 50 time units, and it removes all sleep wards and burn status effects, including mega healing burn, from enemy units on the battlefield. It then grants one random enemy a burn ward and the sleep status effect for 200 time units, even if they have already slept while on the battlefield. So a forced sleep, and this effect, including the random burn ward, will trigger 4 times. Now, given that this is a random enemy, this means that this could affect the same enemy more than once, so not all enemies that are not sleep immune will be necessarily sleeping after this. If no enemies were sleeping at the start of the turn, Perry will immediately get the next turn. This is only usable if less than 2 enemies on the battlefield are sleeping, so at most 1 enemy, to say it in a different way, and she can only use this 10 times per battle. So if only 1 enemy is sleeping after she uses this, she might just use it again straight away, hoping to put more enemies asleep. What will she usually do with the turn that she gets next? She will use her instant skill that is called Concussive Blow, gives 2 spirit, 1 time unit cost, and damages 1 enemy for 300% of her attack stat. And then grants that enemy the Deep Sleep status effect for 100 time units. And yeah, I'm not beating the developer allegations with this one. But what is Deep Sleep? It will override other status effects, that is including all kinds of sleep, and it cannot be overwritten by burn or other sleep status effects, and it also cannot be purified. Now honestly, that means Deep Sleep is quite a bit weaker than I expected. It can still be overwritten by stealth, obviously. It only lasts for 100 time units. Non-sleep allies will still wake up enemies from that deep sleep, so it's not something like noxious sleep. And sleep immunities will not be ignored. That said, it's still a very nice status effect, especially against burn teams with Lucifer. Also without Lucifer, to be fair, but this is pretty much a direct Lucifer counter. While Deep Sleep doesn't ignore sleep immunities, the attack itself does ignore enemy damage reduction effects. Then again, it's just 300% damage. It becomes locked for 50 time units after use, and as a last big bonus, it heals all allies for 800% of Perry's attack. Of course, Deep Sleep also helps against these constant purifications from somebody like Storm Anya, but still it seems like Zigza is careful not to tilt in favor of sleep too fast and too hard again. Now after this attack she will usually have enough spirit and hopefully some sleeping enemies to crash down on with her Crashing Anchor. 3 spirit cost, 80 time units. It deals 200% damage to all enemies, 500% damage instead to sleeping enemies, ignoring damage reduction effects, skin passive skills, and counterstance status effect. It unlocks each time Perry damages an enemy with another attack, which oftentimes will be the Concussive Blow we discussed before. And I can already tell you this skill becomes even better when we look at her passive skills. But first, we look at her first active skill last, because I feel like this is the one she will use the least, which is actually kind of rare for first skills. But Water Barrage, which costs 70 time units and gives 4 spirit, is indeed otherwise relatively unspectacular. It deals 200% damage to 2 enemies. If there is any enemy on the battlefield that is sleeping, it deals 400% damage instead to both targets, ignoring damage reduction effects, skin passive skills, and counterstance status effect. Heals Perry for 100% of total damage dealt. So overall it is quite a nice skill actually. a lot to like there. The high spirit production, the ignoring of all kinds of stuff, the lifesteal. But yeah, usually she will probably prefer crashing anchor when it's available. And with that, let's turn the page to her passives, to the Tides of Fortune. She is permanently burn immune. Perry will not wake up sleeping enemies with any of her attacks. She has 40% damage reduction from attacks, plus 10% for each burning or sleeping enemy on the battlefield, up to 80% max. So that is also quite special. And then there is some awakening skilling in terms of getting turns. Whenever Perry takes damage from an attack and there are 2 or more enemies that are burning or sleeping on the battlefield, she has a 20% chance plus 20% per awakening, so that means 100% if Perry is fully awakened to be immediately purified and get the next turn. It doesn't specify that this is not a skin effect, but I'm pretty sure it's not a skin effect, so it can't really be ignored. And why is that so nice? Because when she enters the battlefield and at the end of each turn, if there are 2 or more enemies on the battlefield that are fire element or have a burn blast or burn drive type active skill, she will become a stun absorber. Whenever any ally would be affected by stun, Perry takes the stun instead. Now this is the first SSR stun absorber in quite a while. Her get turn mechanic in combination with that is very nice. Of course she needs to be fully awakened for that. But also, of course, this is also to counter burn or burn stun teams. Otherwise she will not be a stun absorber. She also doesn't permanently stay a stun absorber, because as soon as there are less than 2 enemies that are fire or burn or whatever, she will stop being a stun absorber. So against pure storm, for example, she will absorb nothing. Now on to the Captain's Orders, which is the name of her second passive. She comes with a hold ground, meaning that if she would be defeated by any enemy attack or a status effect while having more than 1 HP, she instead survives with 1 HP. Each time an ally, including herself, gets the turn, they will heal for 20% of their max HP, which is some very nice support there. And if that ally is water and survives until after the end of the turn, allies actually gain 1 spirit, which is quite helpful. This also puts into perspective some of her more expensive skills, because even if they have 3 spirit cost, it's technically only 2 spirit, and at the same time the concussive blow, for example, kind of actually gives 3 spirit in an instant, while her first active skill even gives 5 spirit. And then this is where it gets interesting, because when this unit's attacks hit a sleeping, non-boss, non-ephemeral target, and that target has 1 HP remaining after damage, that target is immediately defeated, ignoring revenge passive skills, revival passive skills, and any passive skills or effects of active skills that would prevent the enemy from being defeated. So kind of a 1 HP sleep conditional execute skill. Now granted, instant death wards should work against this, and the enemies still need to be sleeping for this to work, so permanently sleep immune units like Kronos can feel pretty safe against her. But this makes her crashing anchor very powerful, especially in combination with her potential sleep all skill that she has. Of course the RNG needs to hit right for that. And then last but not least, some nice side effect. Whenever she enters battle, all allies will be granted sleep wards. Now to be fair, sleep wards are getting nerfed more and more, and after the end of Perry's first turn on the battlefield, all allies will have burn removed and be granted burn wards. Now that's her entire skill set. What are my first thoughts on Perry? I do think that she's the strongest water sleep unit to date. That might be a bit of a controversial take, but she does give sleep back the reins over burn teams again, pure burn teams at least. Burn stun, it's still a bit of a tough matchup potentially, especially against these permanently sleep immune units. Water sleep immune units are a bit of a problem for her, but if you struggle with burn on your server, or rather burn is running rampant there right now, without Storm, besides Stormania of course, being extremely widespread, then this is an interesting pick for pretty much any non-burn team. Yes, I know Sleep Hybrid isn't really where it's been at for quite a long time, but I do see some potential there. Because while she relies on sleeping targets for the most part, and of course non-sleep units might wake up these targets, she can set herself up quite nicely and deal the damage quickly afterwards before this might even happen. Even if she doesn't get lucky with her Sleep Torrent RNG, if there is at least a partially burn enemy team on the field, her becoming a stun absorber can help your other teammates immensely. I think sleep teams definitely have to pick her up. Cursed sleep teams should consider it at least. There might be a slight downside against units like Dark Lancelot who are sleep immune if there is a water enemy on the field. Stealth shields are also a slight issue for her. And in terms of survival, while she is extremely steadfast against burn units and can hide well behind guards, even if she is highly stunned, there is one other big concern with her survivability. While yes, she has the 80% damage reduction, or up to 80% damage reduction, it's not as stable as we've seen with some other units recently. But interestingly, my biggest concern with her isn't even running against stun. While that's obviously gonna be bad, especially against sleep immune units. If there are some units that are not sleep immune, she might still have good possibilities to get the turn from her passive. However, one thing that she is quite vulnerable to in my eyes is poison. She has the normal hold ground, which doesn't matter for burn because she's permanently burn immune anyways. Also some sleep and stun non-execute attacks will not be a problem for her that way, because she might get the turn, heal again. Any kind of poison, mega poison, lethal poison, etc. All of them are rather big problems for her. And so while poison hasn't been exactly the top team type recently, despite the release of Pinocchio, there are plenty of good poison units out there right now. And on top of that, burn is, while still extremely strong obviously, also slightly below Storm right now. And with that Perry release, that gap might widen again. Perry is definitely not a unit that will do much against Storm domination, though there is some nice synergy with somebody like Ryoma, potentially even Pinocchio. So Water Earth versus Fire Storm might become more interesting, more even fights thanks to her. But yeah, all in all, given that she doesn't do anything despite introducing Deep Sleep against sleep immune units and being an extremely strong burn counter, but disregarding most other team types while being extremely vulnerable to poison and stun herself, Storm stun that is, I'm not sure where she will actually go. I mean, she has the speed going for her, 635 speed. She can immediately set up the Sleep Torrent. If the RNG hits right, she can do a concussive blow, putting one to Deep Sleep, putting down the Crashing Anchor, immediately taking out probably mostly fire units if they are on the enemy team. But yeah, Storm Anya will still disable her. The RNG needs to hit right for her to pull that off, given that concussive blow needs to become used first before she can actually use the Crashing Anchor. That gives time for some timeline shenanigans, where when she reaches the turn again and uses the Crashing Anchor, maybe not that many units are asleep anymore. Although again, if that is the case, she might be able to use the Sleep Torrent yet again if she has the spirit. But yeah, a lot of things to consider with her. Very interesting to see how the balance might develop after her release. I already mentioned some of my protections. Personally, even though I haven't pulled for any sleep unit since Cinderella, Water Cinderella, I'm actually gonna keep a close eye on Perry and considering pulling her myself, just because my team right now is doing quite fine against any types of teams, except burn teams, which absolutely crush me. And I think one Perry alone has the potential to turn that around. Alright, that's really enough for now. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, hit that like button. I very much appreciate it, and it helps a lot in supporting my work on this channel. Creating these videos takes a lot of energy right now, besides my overtime heavy job. Don't forget to subscribe to become a true carrot. And as always, thanks for watching.